Okay, let's do another one of these things. Let's help people. Okay, so we've got Geo Collier 04. I recently made this, but something looks odd. How can I improve this? Okay, let's have a bit of a look. So I would say that maybe you've bought these models, or I don't know if you've made these models yourself. But I would say that there's a few things going on with this. So let's just think about the colors first. So in terms of how you've got quite a realistic floor, like a grass and flowers here, as well as a realistic like moon or planet, like Saturn, as well as some sort of realistic clouds. You haven't composed it or used a sky in a realistic way. So you've got a sky blue, but it doesn't actually work how a sky blue would look, where there'd be much more gradient of colors from, say, where the horizon is to the top. What I would recommend actually is looking into getting, say, a sky texture and just putting it behind everything, but facing the camera, or you can do it in post. I would then also look into how you position this. I'm just going to call it a moon. How you position it, and using stuff like fog to make it look like it's in the distance, as well as looking into how you position these clouds and using their alphas, or like cutout stuff, so it looks a bit more realistic, because you can see how you've got the black lines here. I'd be honestly scrapping the clouds and using an image in the background that has clouds, making this this moon a whole lot smaller so that we can see maybe the top of it, maybe as big as, say, like the middle of this cloud, so it's less in your face. And I would put, like, really desaturate it, and then I would just be looking into maybe the front part of this picture now, probably lowering it slightly or bringing it up higher, just so that the horizon isn't really in the middle, so it's a little bit lower or a bit higher. And then I would look into the smaller details, like making sure this flower is actually in the grass, as well as lighting it so that it's similar to the clouds, where we can see that they've got the shadow of this cloud under here and the shadow under here. That's quite consistent with the shading on these flowers. But then we look at this moon, and the shading is on the complete other side, as if there's a light source coming from the other side, making this incorrect. So I would even probably flip this moon shape so that it's lit by the same side as the clouds and the flowers, as well as positioning the flowers in so that it creates a bit of a nicer balanced composition, as you've got a lot of room over here where it's empty, as well as a lot of area in the foreground where it's empty. So I would be looking into adding some flowers a little bit closer up to the front, and especially in these corners, as well as ones further in the back like you do have here, but maybe possibly with these purple flowers too. I would just say those things first to work with this picture, and then from there we can refine the direction of the piece. But yeah, so there's a few things to change on this, but it's a good start to working at things. All right, hopefully that helps. And now we've got Ghost Da Vinci. In celebration of my birthday, I created this render. Happy birthday. Inspired by the picture Blue Marble taken by the crew of Apollo 11. Critique is most welcome. All right, so as I'm looking at it straight up, it looks like it's a really nice render, really nice colors and everything. So I'd need to go in and look at some of the little details now to really pick on it. The first thing is it's not actually centered. So we've got probably about, say, like a little bit over a cursor length on this side, and then quite a larger amount on the other side here. And then up on the top, it's a sort of similar thing. So that's just something to look into. You can definitely either grow this side or shrink this side by just adding the black around the edges. I'm assuming this has just got a black background. Something that maybe you could look into is adjusting the background slightly to give it a bit more like texture or detail, but even just like maybe a couple of stars, but it really sort of depends on like the type of realism or the type of look that you're going for. I do like just the pure black with this. I feel like the stars might be unnecessary, but it's something that you could think about putting in, whether you think it's a good idea or not, but it's just something to think about. Now, in terms of the actual like model itself, like I don't know if this is if these are multiple layers or if it's one texture, and so it's sort of hard to critique. Like, it does look really nice, and there's not much I can really say with this without really knowing how it was built, but I wouldn't say that there's much to put in with this. Maybe just some slight highlights, like considering the use of a normal map so that you could maybe adjust lighting a little bit more, but that's all I'm really going to say with that. The thing that I was looking at too is this atmosphere line as it goes through. I'm assuming this is an atmosphere. Maybe adding just a bit more of a blur if you can, but also making it a bit more consistent as it goes around, as it's quite thin here, and I'm not sure, like, and it's quite thick here, and it seems as if it's like the land that affects it, but it's just something that I've been sort of noticing, the inconsistency with its thickness. But yeah, like, these are just now minor things. Like, I do like all the little bits of blur and stuff that you've used around the edges. It's all really nice, honestly. It's a really nice render. Quite simplistic in its sense, but it really works well. How we've got the simple circle and black background with a highly detailed ball in the middle. Hopefully those little finer points can help you and just make you consider a few more things. But yeah, it's great. And now we've got verified. So I am new to Blender and I'm looking for feedback. This is the first spaceship I tried to model with some basic modeling, and I really appreciate any kind of feedback on how to improve or some ideas where to go with this spaceship to improve it. Okay, so we've got 3 images. I'm just going to get them up. Okay, so first thing, I would just sort of learn how to render out something first. I just think that that's a really cool thing to learn how to do, especially early on, even if it's like kind of not great perfectly, but just learn, because you've obviously got a fairly good understanding of composition with how you've cut these pictures. I'd just learn how to get a basic render out, figure out how to light and its lighting resolution as well as image resolution, just so that you can get some kind of nice render out. That'd be the first thing I would say to learn for you. But yeah, so we've got like a nice shape here with the model. I would really be considering its silhouette, as in like its outside edge from its different angles. It's quite a sort of wedge shape. You might want to consider just maybe adding in a little chunk, or like, sorry, taking out a chunk here just to break up that silhouette, to keep this sort of blocky nature going around. Still keep the idea of the wedge, but just breaking it up a little bit or adding some chunks on to make it a bit more of an engaging shape. And then you do have like the nice use of the see-through texture and stuff here too on the front. I do really like that. Adding a few different types of textures around the outside could be really good. And I would be looking into how you've got quite a chunky model here, looking into adding some finer details around, so maybe like some seams, like lines and stuff that are quite thin, maybe little bolts and stuff too. Just like to give it now a bit more detail over its base shape, similar to how you've got these chunks in here, but maybe just some like, say, thinner rims around it, It does depend on the direction that you want to go with the model, if you wanted it to still be low poly or if you wanted to go into high poly. I would say it could be good to learn how to do higher poly stuff, because then you can start to bring it back and still maintain that detail by minimizing the amount of polygons. And I would also maybe look into even just like using a boolean or something to cut through and make some holes in this front section, just exploring it to see, because I think that the silhouette of this, or like the kind of just the blockiness of it, is making it really bland. So I'd be looking into even maybe taking out some little chunks on the top here, adding in some details on all these flat bits. It can even just be adding like an extra polygon so it has a bit more of a bump, and it can catch the light in a different way, because at the moment, like even just on the side here, like that really adds to it because it catches and gets like a nice gradient here, as well as like if you just look at all the flat bits and think, do I want some detail there, or do I want to add just a little bit of an extra like curve to it? As well as considering then after you've removed all the chunks and build up some stuff, adding a bevel around each edge so it catches the light a bit nicer when you're lighting it. But I would be looking at the shape of this back bit, even just adding, so you'd like duplicate this cylinder shape and just adding a little rim around the edge of it here by using that cylinder shape, just so it makes it look like it's more actually placed onto the model rather than just coming out from the back. I'd also use smoothing, like shade smoothing or whatever it's called on the back here, so it doesn't look as blocky, just so it's nice and smooth, like how you've got the like glass or whatever it is up the front. I would also maybe even think then too about the context of what this would be for. So it looks like it's a one person like car style thing. So think about how they would get into it, where the storage and stuff of things might be, where the fuel is, if there's any guns or anything on it, like if it's a fighting ship, what kind of landing material that they would have, and if this is going to be only used in space or if it comes off from Earth, and if it's on Earth, looking into aerodynamics, and if it would be raised up so that it shoots upwards, like how things would be placed with that. Just things like that to consider, like say if this is a little baby ship in a big mothership, how it might need to be connected on to a little section so that it can like hang and then just drop off and fly off. Stuff like that will really help your design, as well as looking into the sort of silhouette and the shapes that you've got, as well as the flow between different elements. But yeah, hopefully that really gives you some things to think about. And I can see you've kind of added that little rim down here, but yeah, we can make it a bit more prominent on the bigger ones as well. Nice. Now we've got ice cream is for closers. Abandoned farmhouse scene, post-process, link to animation and captions. Let's just look at alright, so we've got a few things here. Honestly, I don't know if I can see any variation in these last three. So I'm just going to choose one and go in. If it wants to load, there we go. Alright, so I'm going to look at the lighting and the models and stuff. In terms of composition, look, I think that you've placed the models kind of nicely. I do like, say, you can get the hint of the bucket and the hint of the chair, as well as the skull, and maybe the like fruits and stuff are in focus. But I would actually drop the light down so you can get a bit more of light on the leg, and that will give a bit more depth to the scene, as well as if you can see the top of the window light on the background here, it'll close our eyes in a bit more into the middle of the scene, as our eyes are drawn up quite high, where this stuff has detail, but it's if that light was down a little bit more, there'd be a bit more balance with everything. And now let's have a look at this model. Really nice skull. Like, that's really nice. If you modeled that, that's awesome. I would maybe just half consider, look, it looks like it's balanced correctly on things. But yeah, just thinking about if it was to roll around at all. I think this is fine as it is, honestly. It was just, I think before when I was looking at it, I thought maybe it would roll back, but no, it does look balanced here. I would say, let's zoom in a bit more. Yeah, like this is a really nice model that you've got here. So it's sort of hard to pick up anything on it. Same with these models here. That crate seems pretty nice too. It is a bit blurred, but it's pretty good. This is nice here with the like effects. The table looks really good too. I like the use of the bevel so you can catch that highlight, and a nice connection there, and good use of depth of field, and like good use of the choice of colors. I'm trying to be picky. It's quite, yeah, I think that in terms of modeling and everything, you're pretty much on the money with everything here. Like maybe just even looking in the dimensions or like proportions of this table, because it does look a little bit chunky compared to say these other thinner pieces. Like if you made it just maybe a bit thinner, it could have like each model might have that overall feel of being like a little bit sinister or something like that. And same with the chair, just thinking about the dimensions of things. But really I think the biggest flaw with this is your composition by the use of light, and you could probably move the chair, the axe and this bucket a little bit closer into the middle to make it this look a bit more chaotic and just a bit more full of life. But I really do think exploring with the direction of that light is really important for the scene, especially even considering adding a secondary light to just catch some little highlights and stuff in other places, maybe of like a red or a brown or something, but that's something to experiment with. I really think the direction of the light though is the most important thing for you to look into. Hopefully that helps with everything. Cool. Now we've got Disastrous Zombie 3285. So this is a work in progress. I don't know if it's got any sound. I can't hear anything. Alright. Okay. So we've got little lightning effects. I feel like those lighting effects could be adjusted to have a bit more like curvature and stuff to it, and like being a little bit more gnarly rather than being quite straight and direct and out. So it's just adjusting some settings on that. I would assume that this is using like a videoed ground, possibly. Maybe it could be real, it could be faked, but I do like how you've put it in the scene, especially with the shadows. Actually, yeah, I'm gonna say that it's been made by you, just because of the use of the shadows and stuff. But I really do like how you've put in the animation of the leaves. I feel like you're using a fisheye kind of effect on this. Just be careful of that, of how it's going to affect the shape of things. Let's try and catch that. I like the use of motion blur, and the model seems quite nice. Maybe just looking into a bit more of a bevel on some areas so it catches the light a bit more. Yeah, because see, just that could just be a little bit more gnarly, maybe a little bit more around. And the movement of this little hoop could be nice too. as it's being picked up, just as if it was like rattling around. But the so I would say that, yeah, like probably the biggest flaw of this so far is just those lighting effects, like the lightning. It like, see, that's nice, but I think also it could come a little bit more just around the handle and stuff too. It's something to explore with balance, like trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. And also, this is a bit strange, how when you're looking at it, the shadow is coming down as if the light is sort of in front of us a little bit if we're looking at it, and then the treetop shadows are coming down. So it's sort of like if we were standing with our back towards a tree. Like, that might sound cool and normal and everything, but it sort of just gives me a strange feeling, like where usually things would feel more natural, say if there was a tree slightly to the side and then like in front of us, and then the shadows were coming down through the trees. But yeah, look, that's just something that I feel like I needed to point out, just to consider about how it's giving me, like, these are subtle things that people probably won't consciously think about, but it does change the effect. Like, it does feel like we've got a lot of open room in front of us, where if you were to have the shadows of the tree presenting it so that the shadows are coming down from something in front of us, then it will fill the space a little bit more and make the piece a little bit more closed in. So now we can focus on the hammer, rather than it feeling like there's all these things out in front of us as well. Bit of a strange thing to think, but yeah, hopefully that does give you a bit more of an idea about like context and stuff. Okay, now we've got Ors 3. Thought I'd try making a Stargate powered by a Dyson sphere, but it just didn't look right to me. What should I change? Okay, so we've got these things here. Interesting. So the first thing is just lighting. I'd be looking into adding a slightly coloured light, either a light yellow or a light blue, just to give it a bit more realism and stuff to the shape. And using post-processing effects like bloom, ambient occlusion, and depth of field will give a bit more variation to the scene in terms of light and shadows, as well as considering adding a secondary light source, which they would call like a fill light, just to fill up areas that first light didn't hit, and making it another color, so it gives a bit more like variation to the lighting, and it'll just help add to the shape. I would say that adjusting your colors, well, once you've added in the lights, it'll really help soften those colors a little bit, as well as yeah, I would say using some sort of like fog effect so that the areas in the distance are just a little bit hazier, and just to give a bit more depth to the scene. Yeah, hopefully that helps. Like, in terms of modeling and stuff, you will just add more detail too, like little bolts and stuff here. Like, think contextually about what might need to be added into the piece, to just add that little bit of extra realism and detail. You'll be surprised how much of a difference that does make. Yeah, hopefully that helps. Alright, then we got CGSUHRUD, I don't know, Fireflies. Okay, so cool. So we've got a model person here, and then like a highly blurred person in the background. Sorry, fireflies in the background with some sort of reflections over water. So this person does look nice. I'd be happy with that. Like, maybe just looking into the thickness and proportions of the person's body, unless you're going for a bit more of a stylized look. But I'd much rather you to be aware of the proportions and choose not to do them than just sort of avoiding them. I'd look into maybe just adding a secondary light source, possibly just to catch the fill in the background just a little bit, as well as maybe adding a slight yellow light from all the fireflies to hit this person from the front, creating maybe a bit of a rim light. In terms of the fire, I would assume that this is like, this fire is out rather than going, but so I'd be looking into flame effects or smoke, especially if it's a still image. You can just Photoshop an image onto the top there and do it nicely. But yeah, like I would be looking into as well adding in a little point light to light him up from that direction. Maybe if you do have it there, it's just not strong enough and it's not showing well enough. But in terms of composition and everything, it's quite nice. I feel like though that this guy's a bit too much in the shadow. If he was lit up just a little bit more, it could balance out the image a whole lot more. Or darkening this area here so that the fireflies stand out. But I still think that this man would be too much in shadow. And still, it's going good. You got some good stuff. Alright, then we've got Robert 97MC, SNES controller. How do I make this more realistic? Please help. Okay, so first thing I would say is for the actual model, but then I'm going to talk a little bit about lighting. So I'd just be looking into adding a bit more resolution to the actual model. See how you can see the jagged edges and stuff here too? By adding a bit more resolution, like, or more polygons and stuff, you'll have a smoother curve. Like how these buttons have a really nice curve around them, especially by using the bevel, which you do have the bevel, but it's just making it a bit smoother around there. I like how you've made this 3D, like where it's popping out slightly. And I'd also look into the materials that you use so that it actually has even a minor reflection on it. So that it might not actually seem reflective, but it's still reflecting some of the light and stuff going around. Now to go into like lighting, it looks like you've got maybe, what is it, one, maybe two lights. I would be using, oh yeah, it looks like maybe just, oh yeah, no, two lights there, you got two shadows. And it seems like you do have them slightly colored. I feel like though that the use of a HDRI in the background will help just give it a bit more of natural reflections and stuff, as well as looking at it from different camera angles can really help show the dimensions a whole lot more, as well as adding in depth of field just to catch some of the like the size and everything of it, as well as possibly using like a nice wood texture underneath it to give it a bit more realism contextually and stuff too. And then adding things like bloom to so that the light really just shines out a bit more realistically and stuff too. Hopefully that helps with everything. I was trying to cover everything that I could there. Yeah. Now we've got Biscuity Tasty. Critiques are welcome. Alright. So, first thing is, yeah, I would light this scene up just a bit more intensely. So just brightening everything up, because it's really hard to see this guy down here. And I would say that he should be the focus of the scene, in like having a bit more influence over everything that's going on. So you could say have like a bright directional light coming down from the tops of these trees, but their shadows just sort of miss him, so now he's like kind of in focus, as well as having it as a slightly yellow light will give it a bit more warmth to the scene, or you can have it a bit more of like a bluer light to make it a bit more cooler, as if it's like wintry. And then I would be like looking into, if you haven't got it already, a bit of depth of field so the background smooths out. I think you might, but then also having some haze and stuff too, so that the background trees are a little bit lighter and a bit less saturated. Your composition is actually quite nice. I do really like how you've composed this. and your use of colors, but I do just wish that it was a little bit brighter. Let me just go into, I'm going to brighten it up. I'm going to see what I can do. Okay, so paste as image. Let's go colors. Okay, and then we're gonna let's add. I can probably do this a better way, but I'm gonna just do it this way. Soft light, and then hue. Okay, saturation. Let's drop that to about half. Yeah, so something maybe a little bit more like that, where now this guy is a little bit more in focus in terms of lighting. And yes, these are a little bit lighter, but you can adjust all that. Like, I don't know if I'll be able to do it in this sort of thing, but just adjusting him a little bit more. So that he pops out just that little bit more. But yeah, it's sort of hard because, you know, I've only got one image to work on. But yeah, hopefully that gives you a bit of information to work on. Okay, we've got Death by a Cannon, work in progress screenshot from an Iowa farm girl, Blender beginner. Old Barn, suggestions welcome. All right, let's open it up. Let's have a look. So yeah, first thing I would suggest is learn how to do a proper render. Like I would say this is from Cycles, but I think, yeah, you should just learn how to get a nice render out quite quickly. Learn how to light a little bit more by adding a slightly colored light, maybe just even placing like a white or green or something plain down the bottom, so then it's actually like got a landscape or something to be on. And like using maybe an area light of a slight yellow, and so it looks like a nice sunlight coming through. In terms of modeling, things that I'd be looking into is how this sort of is quite jagged. So maybe you can like use a bit of a bevel to smooth the edges out, but also, yeah, just consider about how this is quite like a quite a boxy sort of, you know, quite sharp changes, but also how with the rooftop, the little I think the shingles they're called don't come to the edge here, so you just maybe need to think about how this is going to be built, and if you're going to see the shingles at the end, or if it's going to have like a big beam going along the edges, and if it is, then it probably needs to just be a little bit thicker, so it looks like it's a bit thicker than the shingles rather than it being like quite flush against it. And same with like the windows and the doors and stuff, just looking into a bevel around the edges so that it can catch the light a bit better. I would also look into how you're using repeating textures, just trying to avoid the look of it repeating over and over again. So I can see that these windows are using the exact same texture over and over again. And then same with this front beam here, I can see that notch repeating again and again. Yeah, like honestly, it's a really nice barn. You've done a really good job. It's just those little things that that tends to happen a bit. Also how on the edge here, trying to clean up the UV map too, so that everything fits and works correctly, like with the bricks, and the bricks not extending over that corner. Also just fixing up the little connecting parts here, and so that those beams come out thick, and it's not all just completely flush up against the wall so they look all thin. I'd be looking into ambient occlusion too, just to maybe add a bit more into the shadows of the edges in here and just make it pop a little bit more. And it looks maybe possibly like, look, I might be wrong, but you're using a HDRI maybe to light up this scene, although it doesn't really show too clearly on this window. I'd be definitely looking into a HDRI as you're lighting this, because it'll add a lot more realism to the scene. And maybe even looking possibly to how barns are built so that you can add in the little nails and stuff too, and like adding in little extra notches and stuff of where things might happen, like having the paint or something peeling off every time that a person would be holding onto the door. Also considering where the door handles might be. I don't know if there would be door handles on there or not, but it's something to think about, and what type of door handle too. Yeah. Alright, hope that helps. We've got Lord Qrem. Little market scene I did a while ago, but I can't figure out a realistic looking sunlight. Okay, let's open it up. Yeah, so let's just, before I even look at the models, let's have a look at this sky. So if you're wanting to just do a singular image for this, I'd just maybe look into getting an already made image of, like, say, the sky, and just placing it in the background, because then it'll be nice and realistic, especially if you can get it to look the same as the direction of the sun. Otherwise, using volumetric clouds to have a bit more realism, and then looking into adding gradients and skyboxes and stuff to light the scene, as well as using a slightly colored yellow as the sun, just because it'll add a bit more warmth to the scene, as everything's quite white everywhere. And also adding a little bit of bloom into the scene, because it'll just make it, especially with all the whites, just those little highlights and stuff will just give off a little bit of light as they reflect all the light. Looking into, you do have a bit of depth of field, but also ambient occlusion, just to get some of those shadows a little bit more. I don't think that you've got that on at all there yet, but like, these are really nice models. I would just look into repeating textures, some of the proportions on things, just so that you're happy with it. Looking into how this cloth will actually be connected to these poles, making sure the cloth is smoothed out a little bit more. Love these vases, they look really nice. Looking into the grass, maybe having a bit more direction to it so that you can customize it a little bit more. Also thinking about, if a person was standing behind here working the markets all day, these areas would probably be crushed up a little bit more and a little bit more dirty, while the stuff in the front might be like a little bit longer, especially around the areas where it's connected, assuming that these markets are there quite consistently. But if not, then yeah, it's a bit of a different story. I would add a bit more fold in these sort of areas, or just a little bit more of like the stretch, so it's not so flat and blocky. I would add maybe a bit more of a bevel to some of these more square things, just so it can catch the light a bit more, and also looking to, in your UV maps, how these stones will be presented over the angles of things. And yeah, like I said, just adding a bit more of realism to these cloth things here. Yeah, like there's a lot of little things that you could say about this. Just, you know, like how these shingles and stuff actually work on there, have a little bit more variation. But in terms of lighting, yeah, I feel like I've already said everything that I need. Composition's really nice. I would probably even just drop these leaves down slightly and drop the camera angle down just slightly, like, so that we can get a little bit more of the bottom here and just cutting off a little bit of the top. Really like the use of the birds and stuff you've got going on too. I would actually, though, maybe consider placing them over here somewhere, but over here is nice, just because your eye is going to be drawn over here, and that does balance it a little bit more in the image, but you maybe want to add more attention over here in this top bit, and then we can get the camera to cut off these edges just a little bit more so that this area doesn't take our attention too much. Maybe even moving this this section up here, the like chimney, so that everything now becomes a little bit tighter with everything. But yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. Awesome. Now we've got Bloody Smile. So Mini World, come with suggestions. Okay, first thing I would say is just add a bit of bloom around that. Maybe add a bit more bit more of a highlight on this screen, so so it can catch some color, like having a bit more variation rather than just a pure green. The model of the tree looks really nice. Maybe just adding or adjusting the texture so that it just looks like it's got a bit more bump to it and it's not as smooth. Like using just maybe a normal map that's a little bit thinner and scragglier. This sort of area here is starting to get a little bit messy because of the lighting, so I'll just be thinking about the the direction of the tree to try and show off its assets the most, because yeah, this is starting to get a bit messy. So if it was rotated just a little bit, you might be able to see the limb of this tree and making it a bit more obvious, because yeah, it's just not obvious at the moment what's really going on there. I like your placement of plants. I feel like there could be less of a strong trim here of like a line, just by adding a little bit more variations, like of having just little tufts of things and then bigger tufts up the back here. Maybe consider adding in some rocks and stuff too. And I do like the actual model here, but I feel like it needs a bevel just around here to capture the light a little bit more. And also maybe look into your resolution settings, just because sometimes there's little artifacts and stuff going along here too. And also I would maybe look into the intensity of your lights going around the scene, because they're sort of starting to get a little bit muddy in these areas, as well as the shadows, so maybe considering an area light that's a little bit softer, and how these sort of shadows are being cast, because maybe, yeah, these are probably actually it's made out of glass. Maybe I think that might actually be what this thing is. So looking into the settings of the glass, so it just looks a little bit more realistic and doesn't have the big bars and stuff along there. And then also I'd be looking into composition. So having this shot slightly to the left or the right, I'd recommend probably if it was staying as it was now, going to the right a little bit, because then the left can be freely opened up a little bit more and it'll be nice and balanced, because this part is higher than this part. It's hard to explain, but it'll be nicer if this is moved slightly to the side. And yeah, and just looking into your resolution settings and stuff too. That's all I'm going to say about that. Hopefully that helps. Okay, then we've got arms and arms and arms. Work in progress, picking sun test. Would love feedback. Okay. Alright, so I like that sort of hand-drawn look that you've got going on, where it's moving around. I would look into how you're lighting the scene a little bit more, so you can present the like by using two lights of just slightly different colors, just to make the model have a bit more depth. In terms of your animation, it's really nice. Like, I like the subtle use of the eyes and the slight wiggle. I'd maybe just be toning down the spread of the particle effects, because they spread out quite wide as he's vomiting. It could be good to make it clump up just a little bit more, and maybe even possibly using two different colors or a color variation in it, just so it has a little bit more depth rather than the white green. I do like the luminous style of it, giving off that little bit of glow. I feel like it could have a little bit more of an actual glow on his face. You might want to consider adding in a bit of an actual light source from here, just to light him up and to have a bit more control of the lighting. And composition wise, I think it's great. I love that he's like, you've really kept the scene balanced. Let's just watch it from the start again. I would look into your resolution settings, because if this is in HD, there's still a few little things going on with it, like artifacting and stuff, but that's just coming down to exploring. I'd also look into your topology, or like your polygon flow, just of how this is getting a bit bunched up in some areas. So you might have like 5 points or something coming down in some of these sections, creating that sort of weird fold there. So just looking into how you've built this with topology. And yeah, no, that's really cool. I really like that. Hopefully that helps. Now we've got Coffee Viber, Among Us, need feedback. Okay. Alright, so first things first, I would just like maybe shrink, see how you've got the seam here, shrink it down so it goes behind the visor, just so we don't have that seam there, and you can maybe like get that visor part and make it a bit bigger so it hides that seam. I would also just look into how you're building these models, just so it has the right proportions, if this is what you're going for. So I'd get like an image of one of the Among Us characters and just build off that as closely as you can, having it in the scene as you're doing Blender. I really like the big long tongue effect. I like the colors that you've chosen, and the way you've lit the scene. And I like these teeth. Maybe you could add a little bit more to it by like just adding a little bit more resolution, or like more polygons to smooth this stuff out a little bit more. I feel like you've added maybe these drips in post, like as in you've like photoshopped it in, possibly. Let's see, this will probably tell. It's hard to say actually, but yeah, I'd just be looking into different ways that you can make the drool, especially maybe slightly coloring it. And yeah, it's just smoothing out and getting the proper proportions for these models. But the background is good. I'd maybe smooth out the haze a little bit more, so it's a bit more of a gradual change. And when you're lighting the scene, use slightly colored lights just to give it a bit more either warmth or a bit more emotion. And looking into adding some bevels around the edges of these sharper lines and stuff in here too. But your composition is really nice. Like, yeah, and just adding some bevels, stuff down the bottom there. yeah, I'm really happy with that. You should be proud. Nice work. We've got Sleepy Snapper, another fan art for Hollow Knight. Need feedback, let's open it up. Okay, really nice head model. Now, I don't actually know much about Hollow Knight, but so I'm only assuming that this is perfect and spot on. I would look into the material of this red cape. Maybe looking into the normal map so I can catch the light a little bit more and get some highlights, because it is looking quite flat. And looking into things like bloom, ambient occlusion, and like just a bit more depth of field in the front, just slightly, so we can have that sort of miniature effect. But the model, like this needle and stuff, is really nice use of the reflection, and really nice expression on the string as it's going around. I feel like though that this string part here is a bit too distracting from the model. It could be nicer to have it a little bit smaller coming through, and then having something else in the front to create a bit more of a foreground. Just because it's white, it's like taking the focus away a bit from this face. And then if you have it a bit smaller, it'll give a bit more balance to the overall silhouette, which will include this needle of the character. I would also consider maybe adding in some shadows here where the character is hitting in the grass. Yeah, where I would say that maybe that grass was photoshopped in after the fact. And so you might need to look into a bit more about like photo manipulation and stuff, just to smooth everything out a little bit more. But you might have modeled this, it's hard to tell just because everything's blurry in the back. Because it does look like it's drawn too. It's hard to say, but hopefully this does give you some things at least to think about with your model. Now I've got Massimo, New York City, wrong floor, okay. So I've got some, I forget what it's called, and it's sort of like augmented reality style stuff. Okay. So, obviously camera shake, we've got motion tracked, good use of motion blur, and keeping the lighting, I would say, quite consistent. The modeling all seems quite good. Yeah, I'd just be thinking about different reflections and stuff, different blur effects, how you've textured some of these models and stuff too, just like thinking about how to make it a bit like maybe cleaner, maybe thinking about yeah, it's just they you need to look at all the different elements that's in reality, like all the different types of reflections, and you do have like the bloom sort of effects, but then like looking into ambient occlusion, the focal like depth of field stuff, and slight bit of haze. But it is a hard skill to do. You've done a great job. It's just hang on, let's go back. You gotta yeah, it's hard to know how I would probably let's have a look again. Yeah, it's strange how it floats off like paper. Like only that one square fell off, and then everything else sort of fell off like paper. It just could be look a bit more menacing if it was to fall off a bit faster and everything like that. And these would probably have a little bit more motion blur and stuff on them. One last time. Okay, with the light getting dark, I would say that either that's blinking or it's the light in the elevator, but these lights get darker too as you're doing it, which if it was the light in the elevator, then that wouldn't be the thing. These lights would still be bright, but you've just sort of dimmed the area around it. Another little thing to think about. Okay, hopefully that does give you some information to work on. But yeah, nice work. Okay, we've got Underworld DJB. It's better and rendered faster. Now to retain more detail. Just a higher resolution. Anything else I could do? It's better and rendered faster. Now to retain more detail. Just a higher resolution. Anything else I could do? Okay. Alright, so there's yeah, like it's how do we explain? So you need a higher resolution on the inside bit of this volcano. I'd be adding a bit more of haze too, so it looks in the background like a bit of fog. Making these waves shrink a whole lot more and break on the sand, smooth this sand out a little bit more, like by adding normal maps and making it have a bit more variation going up into the grass. This volcano must be quite small then if these trees are this big. Like I would be adding probably a whole lot more trees around. And yeah, I would add a bit more of a blur on the horizon there when it gets to the horizon, because there'd be all like water and moisture in the air to make it a bit blurrier. Maybe darkening the sky a little bit more, just so it stands out a bit more, like, and then probably lighten up the side of this volcano just a tad more. I would add a bit more of a bevel to some of these areas here, adding a bit more of a normal map on the doors to make them a bit more bumpier and a bit more reflective. Look into your proportions of your models too, so that the they are like they fit the way that you want it to fit, as well as with the use of texturing and UV mapping, as some of the things can get like a little bit stretched. And yeah, it's just adjusting some of the ways that you've modeled some of these, where it's quite simplistic. I would just be looking at the different subtle proportions and stuff to smooth it all out. But I really like your use of bloom and the depth of field. You do have some interesting color choices too. I feel like the composition though, there's a bit too much going on. I feel like you can direct the camera a bit more to this volcano and cut out the stairs, just so that there's one focal point, as there's like too much trying to get my attention at once here, and it means that you're losing some of the detail of these little extra pieces here. I would maybe look also into adding an area light for the moon just to smooth it out a little bit more as it gets further away, so it's not as intense and perfect. Yeah, it's that's what I'm gonna say about that. There's a lot of little things with this, but it's going good. Alright, and then we've got Pixel H4231, work in progress. Well, One World Trade Center. What details should I add? Okay, so we've got the HDRI. I would add in first off just a nice big plane to cover the camera scene so we don't see the background so much. But still keep that for reflections. So I would add in I would get a picture of the world, the World Trade Center. Get a picture of it because you'll be adding in like little things like doors, windows, structural points, and then all the little imperfections and stuff, little antennas up the top if there's stuff there. Adding a bit more of a bevel on the top here, so that it can catch the light a little bit more around that edge. Adding anything like these points aren't connected, they're just like floating sort of rings. And so just adding something to connect that to the building. Trying to give a bit more dimension to these flat areas here. And then considering stuff on the ground like bushes or paths and stuff like that. And making sure that when you light it there's some shadows put in by adding like maybe a colored directional light or an area light to put in, just so it has a nice shadow coming from it. Yeah, that's what I'm going to say about that. Hopefully that helps a little bit. Alright, we've got King Ultron 99. How can I improve the realism of this scene? So we've got this image. Then we've got that. Alright. Realism. Okay. So it's quite a muddy looking scene at the moment. Let's just try and see what I can do in post stuff. So edit, paste image, that's the contrast. Oh no, we'll get curves going. Okay, so just to show, it's just making the colors pop just a little bit more. Composition can really help things because everything's quite wide at the moment. You could maybe make things just a little bit tighter by, let's just see if I can do this. Oh, hang on. Okay. Okay. And then we can do menu from visible, no. Because what I'm thinking is, if you can have it just a little bit tighter, it will put into the mind of the viewer that that this is actually a photograph. Because you'll it will look a bit more naturally put together. And so now if we actually have a look at this picture, Like, it's just the little ways. So I would actually think the next thing that you should look into is the stuff like the translucency of plants, because these have like harsh shadows where they would probably still be letting a fair bit of light coming through with everything. And looking even in like how things reflect, even though they really seem like they don't, they have like that smallest amount of reflection. So just looking into how like light passes through plants, as well as upping the resolution on your depth of field so it doesn't look as grainy. And yeah, like those are just sort of some things that I'm gonna say about that, because you do have quite a nice thing here. But yeah, there's just a few little things like, which is going to be now quite a step up of looking into like translucency and composition and adjusting the like sort of settings of lights to just be really matched completely to sort of realism. And then it's just like looking into how, say, this probably wouldn't be in full shadow, like things would be reflecting light back up at it, and it wouldn't have these quite jagged lines. And I would say that's because you're using quite a low poly tree with like a big normal map on it. So I added a lot more resolution to this tree, so that you can really get the sort of smoother shadows. But yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. Hopefully that helps. Okay, we've got God 5P33D232 inviting critiques. Hope you guys like it. Alright, I really love all the little smears and imperfections that you've got on this red here. Love the use of bloom. We've got the line effect on the piece. I would maybe just try to add some sort of detail on this bottom piece too, like if you can get it to show a bit more. And if you can make those lines a little bit more consistent on the button as it's going around, it could really add to the look of it. I'd be looking into maybe how, if there's any hinges on the back of the Pokeball to give it a bit more realism rather than it just being a cup with another cup on top. I really like the textures that you used and the HDRI. I think that really adds to it. And in terms of modeling, like this is quite a simple piece, but you've done a really nice job, I think. Like, and composition and lighting is all really nice. Awesome. Hopefully just those little things help with it. But yeah. Okay, we've got Lamp Chipri, I think. Any feedback? Okay. So it's quite a good composition. First off, I would maybe just bring the camera back a little bit more, so we have a little bit more of a sight of this top tower thing, and then a little bit more breathing room underneath this boat. In terms of lighting, I feel like you should think about a focal light rather than everything sort of being lit up all the time and stuff too. Like, don't be afraid of things being in darkness, kind of like how this boat is. Like, some of these rocks should probably be quite dark as well. And they are here, but the haze is sort of breaking it up just a little bit. Consider the resolution as well of the images that you've got in the back here, where it's a bit too blurry for my liking, like in the back there. The resolution of these rocks could be put up not only in the polygons but through the use of the normal map too. And I do like the flame. I think that's pretty nice. And from what I can see, this model is also pretty good. The thing that's sort of getting me at the moment is this line of her hair kind of blends in a bit too much with this bit of like string or rope. So I would maybe just push her head or her whole body just a little bit further forwards so that those lines are quite separate and obvious. I would also look into making this a little bit more transparent, oh sorry, not transparent, like translucent, so that the light will flow through this bit of material just like it probably would in real life. But that's something to think about and consider in your, like, as an artist. And I do like a use of bloom, and I would probably look into using a higher resolution render just because of all the artifacting and stuff around. I would maybe minimize the size of these particles just to be a little bit more subtle. And I do like the use of the birds and stuff around, but think contextually, like, why they're there. Because, like, I don't know, maybe they would normally be asleep these days. It's hard to know, but they are a good model. I like the use of colour too. I feel like, though, that there's too many focal points with this, how we've got the flame, the moon, and this piece, where they're all like a bit unbalanced. I think if this was a bit smaller and we could see the top of it a little bit more, and maybe the boat was a little bit closer so it looked like it was further away, then we could have a bit more depth and also still show the size of this thing here, like this plinth. I just feel like its design is a little bit too much, where the blue and the pink are a little bit too overwhelming, like just in how everything's composed at the moment. So you could maybe make it a little bit more subtle and just having like more strips of blue and pink to make it look like an older plinth or like ancient sort of thing, where it's just hints of it. And also just considering a bit more of a bevel around the edges of this model, so it adds a bit more depth. I'm thinking this might even be a normal map, so just consider actually modeling this stuff in, unless this is for a game. But I would say by how you've made things, probably not. I'd be looking as well about how you've set up the UV maps for some of this stuff, as it looks a bit stretched and a bit just not correct. But yeah, hopefully all that really helps you to think about how you're putting everything together. Okay, and then we've got 2 to moon, 18, 23, 8 to the moon. Alright, let's go. Making a bit of progress on my modern house. Any tips, critiques? Had to render in 1080p with low sample so I'd actually upload the images. Alright, let's have a bit of a look. So I'm just going to backtrack. I'm going to choose this image. And then if we go inside this image, this one, this one, that one. Alright. So, let's have a quick look through the whole thing. Yeah, I'm just going to say, and like, I know how you're saying how you're rendering it, but just looking into composition, because you can cut the top and bottom off of this to make it a little bit tighter, and it could look nicer. But again, the direction of this camera and the placement of the objects within this area isn't really balanced well, but I think it's because you're probably making a scene that you can maybe walk through or something like that. So it's not really fully intended for that, like, to really strongly consider about that composition. In terms of modeling, I would just consider adding a bevel around the edges of the model, as well as, say, for this person's face, looking into subsurface scattering. Maybe if they're you're wanting it to look like they were made out of skin. Otherwise, yeah, you can look into like the clay sort of style thing. I really like the color work that you've chosen for these pieces. I feel like lighting, you could just add the smallest amount of color to these lights. If you have it, it's sort of hard to tell, but it can just give a little bit more warmth, or a little bit more like mechanical feel to it, or like medical if it's like a slight green or blue. And it's, yeah, especially with you mucking around with colors, it could be good just to enhance some of the stuff, but just on a really subtle level. I really like all your actual models in terms of design. I do feel like yeah, some of the UV or textures could be looked into a bit more deeply so it doesn't stretch as much, but that might be also a cause of the light samples that you were talking about. Same with this one, you can just cut off the top and the bottom so it's zoomed in, maybe just like that. But again, yeah, it's not something I'm going to be too harsh on. It's really nice simple models. I would say you can add in a little bit more creases and stuff into the material of this. And yeah, like I was saying, just adding a bit more of a bevel so that light can be caught on these edges. Really good color choices and choice in materials though. Just wondering if these are lights and if you would want them on or not. It's just making those little creative decisions now. Possibly making this a bit more reflective so that it can just shine just a little bit, so it catches the light a bit more as things are going up. Yeah, and using maybe even just in post-processing, like making this a bit more shadowy. I'm not sure if that's like a staircase or a reflection of something though, but yeah, I think the main thing for you to look into is just like adding some bevels in and looking into your texture maps so that it looks a bit smoother. I'm going to assume that that's a texture back there, but yeah, it's just so like looking into your materials and stuff a bit more and trying to make sure that the textures don't repeat too intensely. I would probably honestly remodel this to be just a bit cleaner, like by adding a bit more polygons in there, just to make it a bit smoother, and adjusting its reflection, maybe even like looking into the type of material that it is and what you want it to be made out of, especially, yeah, looking into the UV maps here so that everything lines up correctly. Which is always a bit of a difficult task, but yeah. And then using ambient occlusion to just give a bit more shadows around the edges here. This is a bit of a weird shot. So I'm pretending that this is going to be landscape, but it just didn't. I would use a slightly coloured light, maybe with like a slight yellow, just so it gives a nice tie-in where it gives it a bit more warmth as you're going through. But yeah, honestly, they're all like really nice. It's just like a few little things as you're going through. Alright, then we've got Obsidian TNT. Made an Attack on Titan animation. Season 2 spoilers. Okay. Let's see. Interesting. Is there more? Yep, that's it. Okay, so let's break it down. So really good use of the like growth effects that you've got going on here. I would say that, yeah, maybe just considering different positioning and stuff of like newer growth, so then the body is quite balanced as it's being built. I would look into the composition as well too, because I would say maybe try and just avoid having that shadow in the background there, maybe having a lower angle as if you were one of the characters from the show, so you can look up to see, and making it look more giant. And possibly just looking into slight color variations of this yellow. So maybe even like some of them are slightly more orange than others, and also just the color as a whole. Maybe if you wanted it to be a little bit more red or something like that to blend it a little bit more. And just how there's quite an obvious seam here. I feel like the camera angle can help with that. There's quite an abrupt change. That's the thing that's getting me the most. Hang on, I've got to go back. Yeah, so you've changed the color, and then it's popped in with new lighting. I would say get that lighting first, and then there's still a bit to do with like adjusting the carving of the body and stuff, and adding a bit more emotion to the face, and changing the color to the eyebrows and eyes. I do like the sort of subsurface scattering and stuff that you've got through there, but yeah, I'd just be looking into maybe using 2 or 3 point lighting to light this person up, so that you've already got, say, the key light here. I'd just be using maybe like a blue or green fill light, and then a rim light just around the outside to make him separate from the background a little bit more, and looking into maybe having less of like a grey gradient background, and maybe just a slightly coloured one. But yeah, I do like the use of bloom and stuff that you've got in there too. Yeah, because it's just that he doesn't have his arms there, but if you were to have a bit more in his arms and everything too, it could just really add a bit more of a better transition, as well as possibly even if you have this render and then this one's still going, and then just having them both laying on top of each other and using a transition cut in, say, something like DaVinci Resolve or like a movie editing program, so that it can slowly transition into this new thing, and you can do some nice like effects there where it transitions using like effects and stuff, so it's like a bit more of a shakier transition, or the light parts come in first, stuff like that. But yeah, no, that's good. It's a cool animation. Alright, next one, or last one. We've got Kulfi 13. I'll just check if I'm still recording. Yeah, I am. Okay. Hey everyone, I'm looking for critique on the aesthetic and general look of this render. How can I improve? Okay. First thing I'm going to say, look, it is a great render, but these look like toilets. I don't know if that's what you were going for, but that's just sort of how I'm getting that. Hey, it's cool if they were sitting on toilets. But so I'd just be looking into the type of shape, maybe making it a bit more round, a bit more like just looking into the design of that, where yeah, like how it could be more rounded up the top here, because I think the things that make it look like a toilet is it being a bit squeezed down the bottom here, so it's got that sort of like goblet style shape, and then it's got the lid, and then it's got the quite blocky part where they hold all the water and stuff. So I'd be like looking into just breaking up that sort of main silhouetted shape. But yeah, like you've got nice color variation in the grass. I would maybe look into turning this yellow into a bit of a brown maybe, or having like the red turn into a bit of like a darker, slightly deader color, and maybe having them in a bit more of an as a whole sort of, they're all sort of facing the same sort of ways and then they curve around in other ways instead of them just being all in random areas. But that's kind of just me. Maybe adding a little bit more resolution to them so that it's not as jagged in some sections. I would add in a HDRI into the scene so that you can get some nice reflections on basically everything in here. So like you've got, you'd have better reflections on the chair model. I like the use of the bevel around the edges and stuff too. That's really good. I would change the light to be a slightly yellow light if you can, just it'll make it look a bit more natural going around. I like the little bubbles and stuff that you've got going on here, like little particle effects in the background. It really adds like a strange sort of sense to the scene. And I do notice how it's over on this chair, but probably not on this one. Try and make it a bit more prominent, but in the lower areas of the chair, because this is sort of like the face while that's the body. Show it over the body rather than the face, or maybe just, you know, in the corners and stuff. Composition is quite nice. I would just like maybe make it a little bit more more centered. So I'm just sort of cutting off like a little slither from over here. And on the table, all the models seem quite nice. I would look into maybe using 2 light sources so that you can get this rim, but also adding, I think you might have even, I don't know for sure, but having a few different light sources just so that you can light up the areas to make them a bit like filled a bit nicer. And so you've got the use of bloom effects, I think. If not, consider putting that in there. You've got the depth of field. I would also look into ambient occlusion if you haven't already. And possibly adding a slight vignette or around the outside, maybe even just like a really subtle one, just to draw our attention in a bit more, but I don't know if that would be fully necessary. I feel like though you need to explore a little bit more with the composition and thinking about the context of this scene. Yeah, because I don't know if you've given any more feedback. I think, yeah, just thinking about what this scene is for rather than just sort of making it. Because once you think about how a person would use these chairs, how they've gotten there, stuff like that, the scene will start making itself, and you'll also have a bit more context of why you're placing the camera. So it might be like that this is the last chess game of the universe or something, and so you're placing the camera over this person's shoulder, and so then they can see the other person's chair a bit more. Or having it quite further back so it's a bit more presented like a model, like a small scale model sort of thing. Or even having the chair, the camera down into the grass, and so then we're looking up at this chair a bit more as if it's all quite giant. These are things for you to think about, but yeah, hopefully that helps with everything. And that's my video of the day. So that's everybody. Hope you all got some help out of that. Thank you.